Um, last thing I want to discuss has to do with this. Actually, has to do with these policies from Trump and the ramifications of these policies. And we said this not just regarding the deportations, like what we see with Venezuela or with the Venezuelans, excuse me, but we also said like it's not like these deportations from these protests from for Palestine. Y'all think it's going to stop with U.S. citizens? They literally once you literally make the argument, yeah, permanent residency en route to citizenship while your wife's an American citizen isn't enough to gain you due process. Yeah, that means it isn't going to take long for them to start arresting citizens, or at least trying to, for whatever reason, as long as it fulfills their goals. And this is what's happening. It already happened, y'all. A U.S. citizen wrongfully arrested by Border Patrol in Arizona held for nearly 10 days. Official claimed Jose Hermosillo, who was visiting Arizona, was without proper immigration documents. Immigration officials detained the U.S. citizen for nearly 10 days in Arizona, according to court records and press reports. As the NPR affiliate Arizona Public Media first reported, 19-year-old Jose Hermosillo, a New Mexico resident visiting Arizona, was detained by Border Patrol agents in Nogales, a city along the Mexican border about an hour south of Tucson. According to the Border Patrol criminal complaint, on the 8th of April, a Border Patrol official found Hermosillo without proper immigration documents. As a U.S. citizen, I don't know about y'all, I don't really walk around with immigration documents. The most I might have is an ID. Because I don't have immigration documents because I'm a fucking citizen. I'm not expecting to be stopped and asked about whether or not I don't walk around with Brazil with my immigration documents. I have some, but I don't need to because I don't get targeted for being black in Brazil, which I'll talk about in a second. And they claimed that the young American had admitted to entering the U.S. illegally from Mexico. I'm gonna say that again. A Border Patrol official found Hermosillo without the proper immigration documents and claimed the young American had admitted to entering the U.S. illegally from Mexico. 2 days later, the federal court document notes that Hermosillo continued to claim he was a U.S. citizen. In other words, Border Patrol lied. Wow, I can't believe it. On the 17th of April, a federal judge dismissed the case. Hermosillo's wrongful arrest and prolonged detention comes amid the escalating attacks by the Trump administration on immigrants in the U.S. Since Donald Trump took office, the administration has emboldened immigration officers to arrest and deport undocumented people, including foreign students whose visas have been revoked, leading to a series of errors. Under the Trump administration's theory of the law, the government could have banished this U.S. citizen to a Salvadorian prison and then refused to do anything to bring him back. Mark Joseph Stern, a legal analyst for Slate, wrote on Blue Sky, "This is why the Constitution guarantees due process to all. Could it be more obvious?" That is, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. When we're talking about due process, and I cannot stress this enough, due process in general, in the Constitution specifically, in general, is a restriction on the government, federal, local, and everything in between, municipality, all that. It is not a restriction on the citizen. That's why this argument people make when they came into the country, they didn't care about due process. That's not how due process works, you dumbass. It's not how due process works. It's a limitation on the government, and it's a guarantee that you have once you come into the country. Because of situations like this 19-year-old was held for 10 days. For what? For driving from New Mexico to Arizona while being Latino. Not even being here on a visa status. not being a legal resident. He's a citizen. So not only are you guaranteed due process because, like, yeah, you can be a citizen and get arrested, but like you have to be guaranteed due process. Because I ask you this question as I always ask situations like this, and I will continue to ask situations like this. If Joe was it Jose or was it Joe? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I want to make sure I get his name right. Jose, yeah. Jose Hermosillo. If his name was George White, middle-aged Caucasian male driving a Honda Odyssey from New Mexico to Tucson, do you think that they would have asked him for his immigration documents? Do you believe they would have asked him for his immigration documents? Probably not, right? Which is why you have to guarantee due process. Because when things like implicit or explicit racial bias come into play, stereotyping comes into play, profiling comes into play, which it always does when we're talking about the overall police state, criminal justice system, or immigration system in the United States. It always comes into play. Due process is the only chance that you have to not end up, in this particular case, potentially in a Salvadorian prison, guys. Due process is the only chance you have to not end up indefinitely in a detention center, like some of these kids and some of these parents have been under not only the Trump administration, the Biden administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration before. Like, that's why we need due process. Christian, yo, Niko, read my super chat when you get a chance. Oh, did I miss it? My apologies. Yo, Niko, FIU police now working with ICE agents. I heard that. I read an article about that the other day. But actually, FIU, unfortunately, has worked with ICE agents before. So, and it's a long story, but I know a young woman who was, she's not even Latino. She's from Bangladesh. And it was like a problem. Like her family had to resolve with her particular immigration status. Her father had residency or citizenship, but like she didn't have it yet, was in the process of doing it. Like the school was helping her, but they tried to deport her anyway. It was a whole thing. So yeah, that's FIU. But you know that's run by. But that's also Florida for you too. Florida boy, I ain't never seen a state. Oh, I guess Texas would be the other state, right? But Florida as a state, they just are shameless. They can make so much money off of immigrants, off of undocumented immigrants, dog. They make so much money. Their state probably could not run effectively or efficiently without undocumented immigrants. I'm talking about at every, but I'm talking about Uber drivers. I know a dude who came from Brazil. He was a white Brazilian, actually. Came from Brazil, overstayed his visa. But before, because he got you can do 90 days and you can extend. But as soon as he got there, bro, he got his license and got rented a car and did Uber. So he was actually able to overstay because like the Hanover. How do you say it? When you had to renew, there you go. The renewal process for your Uber like stuff is like every year or so. So he was able to like overstay for like 2 years or something like that. He was never stopped and no one cared. But like he was undocumented. And you know, he made his contributions to the state and he went back to Brazil at some point. But like Florida will sit there and be like, we're like the harshest state on immigration. No, you're not. Y'all pretend, y'all be fronting like you are, and they're taking all the monies. They have agencies set up in Florida, y'all, where you can come here undocumented. You go to the states undocumented. I'm not going to say which countries I know for a fact participated in it because I got personal friends that have used this agency. But you go to the state, you go there from whatever country you're from, Colombia, Argentina, Chile. I was going to come from Paraguay. And what you do is you get this agency to get you a job. And you give them a portion of your paycheck because the agency is guaranteeing that you have immigration documents. And the company is just taking the agency at its word because there's a wink, wink, nudge, nudge thing that goes on out there. And that's how, and like, so all of South Beach is just full of undocumented immigrants. But once you get a job and then you get a license, which you can do, it's actually like because like once you get a residence, if you get people just sign over leases because they build up a network, right? So that when they get a lease, you don't go through the whole process. You just sign over your lease or sublet So now you have proof of residency. You can put a light bill in your name, right? It just becomes easier and easier and easier to overstay. And Florida is just known for pretending like they give a shit about the undocumented immigrants, but they actually don't. They need them. They can't function without them. So it's just funny. But yeah, man, like at the crux of all this, that is why due process is so fucking important. I can't stress like this violation of the Constitution from Trump, whether it be with Khalil, whether it be with any of the Palestinian protesters, whether it be with this tax exemption issue, right, with Harvard, all of it. You need due process. You need to respect the Constitution. And we have to understand what the purpose of the Constitution is rather than what they're trying to convince us the purpose of the Constitution is. Because they're trying to convince us the Constitution was like the Bill of Rights, right? The Bill of, which is, these are rights that are considered to be, at least in the United States, human rights. That's why we put them there. Right? That's why the Founding Fathers put them in there. They're trying to convince us that the Bill of Rights is made to protect the government and not us. Right? They're trying to convince us that the Constitution was made to protect them, not us. To put limits on us and not them. Hell, if you've noticed, guys, so remember when prohibition was passed? One of the most interesting things about the prohibition situation when it comes to the Constitution, I feel like, is the fact that it was a statement that set a precedent to remind people what the Constitution was for. Because there was an amendment passed for prohibition back in the day, which put limits on people, not the government. And to my knowledge, that was the first time that happened in the U.S. Constitution. That is probably largely how the amendment was taken away. I know it was voted out, but I'm saying, like, when the argument was probably being made in court, is like, that's not what the Constitution is for. You can almost guarantee it's not what the Constitution. Every other amendment in the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, is about limits on the government and the guaranteed rights of people. It is not a limit. That is for the states to do. That's for the states to decide. It's not a limit on what people can and can't do, as far as like their liberties are concerned, their civil liberties. It's not a limit. This is your guaranteed right. And if there are limits to that, those are laws that we pass later on, but it has nothing to do with the constitutional right. And even if we pass laws, the go-between, the middleman, if it were, to handle a situation that seems like it is not jiving, whatever this law is not jiving with the right that's guaranteed by the Constitution, that is the due process. That is what it's for. Because the interpretation of either of those things can be wrong, right? Can be abused, can be manipulated. That's why lawyers get paid as much as they do sometimes. Because you got to be if you're really good at manipulating it, you make a lot of money. If you're really good at figuring out who's manipulating the interpretation of these laws or the Constitution, you also make a lot of money. If you're a judge who can see through the manipulation, you also make a lot of money. If you're a judge that accepts blindly when these laws are being manipulated, like a Clarence Thomas or a fucking Judge Alito, for example, you also make a lot of money. But the whole process in and of itself, even though we know the criminal justice system in the U.S. is a sham, that's once again why it's even more important to just remember what due process actually is and what it's for. Because a 19-year-old just sat in jail for 10 days. Or no, he didn't sit in jail. My apologies. I can't say that. He didn't sit in jail because he wasn't arrested. He was detained for not having immigration documents. He sat in an immigration detention center. That is not jail because he did not commit a crime. And he was able to be held for 10 days in an immigration center because we couldn't prove that he committed a crime because we didn't arrest him for anything. But we don't need proof that he's not an immigrant until, like, the rubber meets the road and the judges start asking questions. Then it's, damn, okay, I guess we got to go ahead and just bite the bullet. Sorry, yeah, man, he's a U.S. citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, how the hell is this making America great? How does this make America great or safe? How? And how can people